Hello and welcome to Classical Games You Should
own?
Know. My name is Thomas Magby. I am today's game master,
Thomas,
as
you can't
always.
introduce your own episode.
And I am joined by my two compatriots, Graham Donaldson.
Hi.
And AJ Hannenberg.
I rebel.
Now, gentlemen, as you know, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus recently. And what I appreciate is that I'd given you all the assignment to study the rules to the game of life. And it took us a little longer than expected. Now, the game of life, what do you think the age, again, you studied this very closely. I believe that's for ages 4 and up.
It's a great game.
So naturally, that took us 6 weeks to complete.
Yep.
So appreciate y'all getting that
You
done.
spin a little wheel and you have to like pay a mortgage.
Yeah, I think that is actually how the game works. So gentlemen, so we're going to start our live play of the game of life. So Graham, if you could roll your die for me, and then let's see where you end up.
This isn't
Waiting
Dungeons
for
and
it.
Dragons, is it?
No, it's the game of life. I've told you that over and over. So no one can hear you.
2.
So 2. Okay.
Is that good? Oh, the 3 fell off.
The 3 fell off. What does that mean?
Yeah, let's put that one away.
Okay.
Oh,
I get to roll again.
One of my dice is having problems and the 3 is falling off. But please don't lose that 3. It's silver.
what?
Silver?
AJ,
Yeah,
can you
silver.
explain these die that are just sitting in your
Here,
room?
if you want to pass it to me. Is it already back in?
No.
Okay, I'll
It's
fix
just
it.
floating
So
on
there's
top.
you have this die and there's like silver inlaid in that number. That's what's
Yeah.
happening in there.
So they are,
Should we be using these?
yes,
Okay, cool.
they're for using.
Great.
They have a guarantee.
Okay, so you rolled a 2. So
No, I get to roll again. That dice was...
Oh, sorry, that's a great point. Yeah, thanks, good.
The 3 threw off the weight.
yeah.
1.
1. Okay, so that means you lose, which means you're sitting here recording an episode of Classical Stuff You Should Know with us two hoodlums. Much appreciated.
For my life.
Well, for the rest of your life, as a matter of fact, both to your chagrin and to the joy of our listening audience.
Okay.
You find yourself at the age of, how old are you?
40.
Man, old. Okay. But happily married, and you have your little homestead out in middle of nowhere outside of Austin, joyfully working at Veritas Academy. It's
true.
AJ, can you go ahead and roll your die as well?
5.
A 5. So you're doing great. You also find yourself at Veritas Academy. Sitting here, you are more joyful at the chance to be recording with Classical Stuff You Should Know. Much appreciated.
So we're doing the same thing, I just like it more?
Yeah, you just are much happier about it. Okay. Well, gentlemen, let's see what happens next in this game. Graham, can you go ahead and roll your die?
6.
6.
Let's go.
You are, so I was going to make this be a negative thing, but I guess it has to be positive. So you are contacted by a number of competing schools in the Austin area.
Okay.
And they say, Graham, we will pay you any salary that you want if you will come and work for us. But the schools that are reaching out to you, none of them are classical schools. Do you consider any of these offers? Any amount of money. Come on, Graham.
Probably. I mean, they're not... like, what do you... If they're not classical, what are they?
Well, let's say, off the bat, are there some types of schools where you're like, I would not go near that place?
I guess, how much freedom do I have to teach the class the way I want?
I want there should be some kind of like
Or is there,
pedagogy
like,
overall.
there's a pedagogy over
so
that and you
again, we're going to
submit
talk a
to?
little bit about Maria Montessori as we get into this. So, you get a Montessori school that reaches out to you.
Probably not.
Why?
No.
Tell me more.
Actually, I don't know much about the Montessori school. I know all of the like memes and stereotypes about Montessori's, but I
Okay.
don't know anything about the Montessori school.
Fair enough.
well, how much money were they offering?
Any amount.
amount.
You name the number.
So I could like work for 1 year for like $8 million.
Why work for a year? I mean, I feel like you're not playing this game the right way.
Yeah, I was going to say,
what's
I'd
the-
choose $1 trillion and
Yeah.
I'll give you like 10 minutes of my time.
Yeah, and then problem solved so easily. Let's say that you're actually going to have to sign a contract for some number of years, but
That changes things.
changes things a little
You
bit.
can do anything for a year.
Fair enough. For $8 million, probably
Yeah,
you would consider it.
I'll teach your crazy school for
Yeah.
a year.
Crazy school. Okay, I want to hear this. That's why I'm posing the question.
It's
AJ,
Italian.
Maria Montessori is. Is that where we're going with this? AJ, same question to you. You want to roll your die so I can pretend that this my
It's a
question
game?
is tied to the game that you're playing.
Please roll your dice.
Okay, sure.
We have to maintain this illusion.
Okay. 1.
Oh my gosh,
Let's
you're
roll.
fired from Veritas Academy. I'm so sorry.
And I have to...
You need to find another job.
Okay.
And I'm assuming you want to stay
Actor
in
slash model.
Okay, good. And all those jobs are taken. So then you're like, what's next? Oh, education is a thing I've done before.
No modeling jobs.
All full.
We got plenty of people to take pictures of, man.
Yeah.
It's over.
Weirdly enough, they only say that the jobs are full when you walk up to apply for them. So I'm so sorry.
Checks out.
And you will then need to go and find another school. Classical schools, they're not hiring.
Okay.
Are you open to working at a different kind of private school, different kind of pedagogy?
I would have to see. I think I think it depends. If it's like a boxing school, I would need to train first.
That would rule.
But
I want to do a boxing school.
I do love to teach. I think it just depends on what I'm teaching and if I have control and if it's not morally, depraved,
Okay.
or I feel like I'm teaching something that isn't good.
Okay.
I think all that matters.
Let me think of it this. So, I've mentioned we'll talk about Maria Montessori a little bit. In part of this, I do want to hear your thoughts on like the memes and associations you have there. We will be actually talking about one of her books called The Montessori Method, and just kind of a few takeaways from that and kind of what she describes as the Montessori method. So we'll try and tease out some of those things.
Are you trying to figure out where your kids go to school, Thomas?
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
that
part
what
of
this is?
So my oldest is 5, and like we're figuring out education choices for us. Having been part of a classical education podcast for 100 years, how long have we been doing this? That probably
5.
would lean things that way, but it's led us into reading more about other education methods, and so I'm curious to kind of read some original sources on those, talk with you all about what you all think about them, and see what you all think.
Let's do it.
So I guess just because I'm curious for what you all think about these different pedagogies, and since it's been 6 weeks since we've recorded, do we just want to start? So you all teach at a classical school in Austin, Texas, called Veritas Academy. When you all think of like what it means for a school to be classical, what does that mean for you?
It means original source material, older books. It means smaller classes of conversation. Emphasis on history being the backbone of all of the classes. We teach Latin. The actual texts themselves are classical, so they're old books. And then the one that I've always thought of is it is a teaching pedagogical method that works with the grain of the human soul as opposed to against it.
I like that.
Thank you. So, a conversation, and then also it really does have like a master-student relationship, apprentice-style thing, as opposed to like, we're all in this together trying to discover it for ourselves. If that makes any sense.
So can you say a little bit more? So it's like directed.
It's more directed. You have the teacher acting as sort of like this dialectical sparring partner. So the teacher and the student are engaged in conversations, and the teacher is trying to get the students to come to conclusions about things using logic and reason, and the teacher is acting as the sort of the counterbalancing force of dialectic. So asking clarifying questions, asking sort of penetrative questions about what's happening, as opposed to like. So, if we're reading a text, as opposed to me saying like, AJ, what sticks out to you in this section of the story? But do not care. Who cares what AJ thinks sticks out? But asking questions like, all right, why is Hamlet doing this particular thing? Why is he doing it? Somebody tell me why. And then someone says why Hamlet is doing this. And you say, okay, what's the evidence that you have for why Hamlet is doing it in the way that you've described? And the student sort of gives a reason for that. And then you say, okay, well, what about when he says this kind of thing? And they're like, oh, yeah, so maybe he's more like this. And so you're having this, that sort of is the process of the sort of like dialectical questioning that comes to the conclusions about something through means of questions. And so the Socratic method in the classroom is the teacher who has a destination that he wants the students to get to, but he has the students discover the road to that destination through the questions that the teacher asks the students. Does that make sense?
So there's a place that you're trying to get to with this education. There are correct answers. There are correct views or interpretations, and you want to get
probably more importantly, correct methodology. So it's like I less care whether or not the student thinks Hamlet is someone to emulate or someone to pity, but the process of coming to a conclusion about Hamlet is there is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. If it's just sort of like your gut impression, I was only Hamlet because he's like, he just reminds me of my brother. That doesn't matter. Like, that's not going to be a helpful heuristic for the rest of your life. You can't just compare people to your brother. But so then there is a proper way to assess the character in that example. If that makes any sense.
AJ, anything else you want to throw in there?
Well, that's pretty good.
Okay, you did okay.
Yeah.
After a few hundred of these episodes, hopefully we have an answer on that one. Woo-woo. But even with that answer you're giving, you do want the student to eventually agree with something, right? So it's not just that you have conveyed information to them. You want them to be transformed into someone who either appreciates these books or recognizes the good guys from the bad guys or understands how to read this on their own, right?
Or if you want to apply it with math, I think the best example of classical education in math is when Socrates talks to the servant and gets the servant to make pretty profound conclusions about the natures of triangles and squares just by asking him questions.
Yeah.
That's, that kind of methodology, as opposed to saying like, hey, servant, memorize these formulas and then apply them to circles and squares and triangles, is getting them to get that using questions.
Okay. So then that idea of you're working with the grain of the student, that's kind of the Dorothy Sayers idea, that you have these different kind of propensities based on the age of the kid, and they're more open to learning certain things by age.
Yeah.
Am I?
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know much about. I mean, Do
you mean something else when you say?
No, that's what I mean. I don't know how much. I haven't taught younger enough grades. I've been with teenagers for so long that I don't really feel like I know to answer whether or not it really is a different stage thing. I'm sure it is. There's things that first graders are more prone to want, ways that they want to learn than 15-year-olds.
You think more than of, in a given subject, you start with the basics, you build those up, show the relationships, and then get to the conveying of them. Like the grammar, logic, rhetoric is within each subject.
Yeah.
Is that? Okay. Makes sense. Okay. So then taking that idea of you're working with the grain of the student, or you're saying like there's a benefit to this classical method, right? You think it is right at some fundamental level.
You're not building me up to some big gotcha, are you? Like, oh, you're actually Montessori.
I would love to do that.
No.
What was the one with critical theory?
You told
from
me I was a
forever ago?
communist or something.
Oh, yeah.
We're all communists. That's not true. Okay, so well then I'm just wondering how you would prove that an educational method is kind of fitting with the stage of a student. How would you know that the approach you're taking to education is either working or just in that statement of kind of matches with their developmental stage? How would you assess that statement or know if it's true?
That they, and this is sort of a weird way to say it, that they are enjoying it, and not that they're entertained. They may not enjoy it in like the actual moment of the difficulty and the hardship, but that later on they look back and say, that was so good, or that was transfer. I have a lot of people, because we teach seniors, and seniors are often very sappy because they're leaving, and they often come back and they say like, 10th grade English was such an important class. That was my favorite class that I've had. And I take that to I mean, that's very flattering, but it's less to do with me and more that I say like, that's to me is like the class where I feel like I have nailed like being able to teach those subjects in that sort of classical way. And that's why a student has found something like that to be really enjoyable, is because they are reading the books and they're sort of at, it's like the right age, the right books, the right stage of life. A fifth grader isn't really self-aware enough to be really like knowing how important or how much they've been enjoying fifth grade.
I think the easy thing is just look what the kid loves.
Yeah, look what the kid loves, and it's sort of like it's like a plant. How do you know a plant is healthy and is in like the right environment? There's all sorts of environments that plant could be in. Well, the plant is like healthy and happy and producing fruit, and well, there's a human version of that you can see in a child.
Well,
as
I mean, yes, producing fruit in the classroom, but you can even look at what they love separately.
Exactly.
Like little kids want to tell you facts they know. They're like, did you know this thing about dolphins? Right. They want to talk about that. They want to know facts. They want to get all the facts they can possibly have. They love reading about trucks and trains and looking at pictures of animals, and they're full of facts. So
you're tying that to the like they want to absorb material at this.
They want to absorb material, and
learn anything.
they're not making huge connections. They just want to know all the things they can possibly know, and then junior high kids start, developing right and wrong. They want to tell you about connections they've made and systems they've concocted and like plans and how they've solved problems. And then when you hit high school, they want to express themselves. That like a lot of it is, I just want to be known. And so how you do that for kids is I think look what kids typically love at that age, and you will find the place to teach them.
Which from your, you've worked with high schoolers for a long time, so you have a sense for like what they're trying to do. They want to express themselves.
Yeah.
And so then kind of classical education fits with that.
Yeah, just tell them, I'm teaching you how to do this well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's say, to take your plant metaphor used at some point, so, you know the plant is healthy because it grows, right? You see it, you water it, you give it sunlight, it grows. You kind of judge it by results at some level. Like at some level, you see what this plant has grown into, you see what this person has grown into. What if I told you that there was an educational method that was used for many famous individuals, many prominent individuals? What if I told you there's an educational method that was used by Jeff Bezos when he was growing up, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, George Clooney, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, Yo-Yo Ma? I can keep my list going and going and going. Would that tell you anything about? Tell you anything about the underlying educational system? If you can point to many people, if at some level, like what people grow into is a sign of the success of a method or not, does that tell you anything about the method?
That it's geared to personal success.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, I think it does. But I was going to say the same thing. I'd still like to know if those people are good or not.
So there's
How are their marriages?
yeah. So we might be able to say more about their like popularity as opposed to who they are as a person.
Or material success.
Yeah.
Like they might have lots of cash, but I don't know if I actually want to hang out with Beyonce.
You want to hang
I'll
out
be
with-
honest, I
you
really
wanna
wanna
hang
hang
out with
out with
Beyonce.
Beyonce.
Let's
Really?
Yeah. Of course.
Just for a day. I don't know if I want to keep hanging out with Beyonce, but I'd like to, like even just as a story.
I don't think she'd like me very much.
I think you guys would have a heck of a time. I think she would have the most fun with you.
I think
during Beyonce.
I don't even think. What would we talk about?
And this is why I think she would
Yes,
enjoy your
exactly.
company
There'd be
so
nothing
much.
to-
You're
yeah.
not trying to talk to Beyonce about what everyone else is trying to
Yeah.
talk to Beyonce about,
Yeah.
and I bet she would flourish.
Oh.
There's something to you like not caring about that conversation that would probably be
I mean,
refreshing.
she's from Texas.
Yeah.
I love this.
You studied up on
just want-
Beyonce. Okay, tell me more.
I
What
want-
other Beyonce
I
facts?
want this to be.
Yeah.
If you're an animator that
Yeah.
knows us,
Yeah.
please,
Do that,
please,
yeah.
please make this happen.
Yeah.
Write this as a play.
We have that one person who
Something.
animated one of Graham's episodes from a while ago.
Yeah, if you're still listening,
Yeah.
shout out to you. That was
And
a
I've
great
tried to
episode.
find it. I can't find it on YouTube because it's so like
I think I
I
saved
don't remember
it.
the title
I think
is.
we have
or-
it.
Yeah, I think
have
I've got
Oh,
it saved.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, didn't we post it on our channel?
I think we
So
linked
we
to it on
should.
Twitter,
We
X,
should
whatever we
post it
call
on
it.
our Patreon.
And I think we liked it also, so I don't know if we can find that through YouTube. But
Anyway, sorry, Thomas.
no, so I guess I expected you all to be more critical of that, but you'd say that it does tell you something about this method if it like leads to successful people.
Well, if you keep on making twerps, then
I guess I mean like, can you really are you tying their success to the Montessori method?
And I guess if I hadn't said they all were Montessori educated at some point, yeah, I think that's a good question of how much do you tie to the education they went through, and especially the way Montessori starts is that it's for little children. So
Yeah.
it starts. So Maria Montessori, Italian, as you might be able to tell, 1870. We'll talk a little bit about her background. It's not. We'll talk a little bit about, but she's developing this method that's for kind of less well-off students in Italy. Is where this starts, and it's really her book will either reference students age 3 to 6 or age 3 to 7. So we're talking like little kids. 6 or 7 would be like first grade, right? So like kind of even that. What we now call pre-K. This is around the time where kindergarten is like being rolled out and becoming a thing. So it is oriented toward a much younger age. Might be hard to connect your education age 3 to 6 to who you become as an adult. Is that?
I guess or some people could listen to our podcast and be like, man, AJ, Thomas, and Graham are really interesting guys, and I listen to them. Oh, they all went to like Canadian and American public school.
Yep.
Like that must be, it's like, well, a lot of our interests are in spite of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It would be, but
I think that's fair. It is it's a thing people will point to. I guess
Sure.
Probably the main reason people, if you subscribe to a pedagogy, it's because you think it's right. at some fundamental level.
I would point to the fact that they're all part of the Illuminati. That's
Okay,
my.
there. I was
that's
waiting
what would be my,
for a little more on that. Okay, so there is this method. It's called Montessori. It comes from Maria Montessori. Already referenced that she's from Italy, born 1870, and she starts off not really. She kind of goes the direction of wanting to be a medical doctor, more so than being an educator. She will go to it's the University of Rome, their medical school. She graduates in, I think it's 1896 is right, and is the first female doctor to graduate from that program. And graduates, wants to work in medicine, starts out working in medicine, but ultimately starts, she just has this interest in education that over time kind of draws her back to working in that. So between 1896 and then 1907 is when she opens her first school that's kind of building out what this method is, this what we now call the Montessori method. Though I guess I say we call it that. That's her first book, 1909, is the Montessori method. It has a longer name in Italian, but by I think it's 1912, early 19-teens when it comes to America, it's called the Montessori method. So yeah, it's her kind of trying to codify this method she's using for the less well-off students in this district called San Lorenzo. Essentially what happened is that there were these like public apartments that were put in place. A lot of people moved into this area, and suddenly you had all these kids, and they weren't going to start school until, again, 6 or 7. But there were lots of kids around. They needed some kind of, the families weren't well enough to send them to some private school. And so instead, Maria wanted to take care of them and to teach them. And the house is charmingly called the Casa dei Bambini. And I believe that's the children.
House of Babies.
House of Babies, yeah, House of Kids, which is just very funny. So, okay. So the Montessori method, I'll reference this a few times. It's both talking about the underlying method of like what is Montessori, and then also it's the name of this book. Graham, you made reference to having some kind of familiarity, or like there's the meme of what Montessori is. You want to say more?
I mean, the meme is that there's like you basically these free range kids who are able to sort of like flop around to whatever interests them, and as they can kind of convince the adult in charge that they're doing some kind of like important thing of discovery, they can just kind of like fart around, do whatever they want. That's always the meme that I have, is that they're not held accountable to any kind of like output or any sort of like structure, that they are free range. Now that makes sense. Maybe that is the methodology, and that makes tons of sense for if you're like ages 3 to 6. That's fine. But we have Montessori schools that go up to much older.
Yeah.
And if that, so at some point. So
yeah, my meme is like they may have done a whole bunch of research on how to build a clock, and they built a clock, but all the numbers are misspelled.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
But they built something, right? Like they
built it.
Yeah. But it's maybe not the best clock you've ever looked at.
Or the years, it's
yeah, but I don't know what flea is.
They're allowed to grow disproportionately in one direction, and not in other ones, and so you've got these like lumpy brains.
Well, and they wouldn't choose to do the hard thing.
And they wouldn't choose to do the hard thing.
The hard academic stuff.
You know what I really loved? You know what like really?
I would love to know.
You know what really like
Please tell me.
works within I'm a visual learner,
of course.
Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. Tell me more.
And as a visual learner, I learn about society and emotions and stick-to-itiveness through games and through the medium of
The Sims 4?
Yeah, and so how I learn about what it means to be, how I learn all the important things, and math is like with Minecraft and with video games about teaching me, to be a hero and how to overcome bad guys. So I'm going to play video games all day, and that really resonates with me as a learner.
Yeah. And are you trying to say there's something
Montessori
wrong
method.
with that? I don't understand.
This is Montessori method.
So yeah, I think, and that would make sense as kind of the meme of it, of the kind of, or a twisted version, or like using those principles to, to bilk your parents to get more video game time out of them. But what Maria is doing, and I think I can't speak for all.
We should never judge
Montessori
something
schools.
based on its bad, on how it's like
Implementation.
poorly implemented.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I could see someone saying all those things to try and get something, and there's probably some of that. But an important. Basically, I'm asking you to kind of direct where this next part, where we go through some pieces of what is this method. So maybe I'll start with.
So, like, what's a day look like for a kid?
Oh, there's actually a schedule. Do you want to hear that?
Yeah.
I think you'll. I was surprised at. So the Montessori method, the book, is strange. Just in that, I expect.
Do you choose your own way through it and what parts you want to learn?
Yeah. It's a choose your own adventure book. It was really progressive for the time. I really
love
respect
those
it.
books
That would be
as a kid.
incredible. If you could get like a Charlotte Mason book that's like choose your own adventure, that'd be awesome. But
It always ends with you like catching a butterfly.
you have to go outside for 8 hours a day. I think Charlotte Mason will be our next episode. I don't know.
Charlotte Mason did not live in Texas.
She did not live in Texas, no. But so if you were, let's say you're going to write a book on classical education, maybe you would start out with like, here are the books you should read, or like year by year. I don't know, like these are the things they should have been exposed to, or poems, or whatever. Maria Montessori, like this book is, you end up getting a lot of these like what I might consider secondary or like outside of education things. So when I think education, I think I know Veritas is not a full-time school where your students are in class the full day at the high school level, right? It's the college schedule. But like a typical school, you show up at 8 or 7:30 or whatever, and you're there till 3:30 or whatever. Like, and then education is what happens there, right? Education is what happens during the school day in the classroom. And I think knowing that Maria is teaching these kids who just like have nothing else to be doing in the San Lorenzo district, she's very much more concerned with like the whole person. Like she wants these people to be grown up into like functioning human beings. And so what she'll talk about all the time is she talks about cleanliness. She talks about like the like bathing and clean clothes and
She just sounds like their mom.
kind of, right? That comes up a lot, and she talks about diet a lot. She has this she has this chapter where she goes through like these are the kinds of foods to eat, these are the foods to avoid. She has a very funny.
What were some? Do you remember any?
She loves butter.
Yeah.
And so she has this thing where she's like, bread by itself is no good. Bread plus butter, that's a full meal. It's just like, okay, cool. And it's just like pages and pages of that. So this is chapter 7. Exercises of practical life proposed. This is the winter schedule, is what it says, but she goes through hour by hour. So opening at 9 o'clock, closing at 4 o'clock. 9 to 10, entrance, greeting, inspection as to personal cleanliness, exercises of practical life, helping one another to take off and put off the aprons. That's an important. They have aprons that they put on while they're in there so that they don't get like stuff on their clothes. Going over the room to see that everything is dusted and in order. Language, conversation period. Children give an account of the events of the day before religious exercises. That's 9 to 10. Maria was she was at least born into a Catholic family. I believe she was Catholic as well. So it starts out with this kind of religious association as well, especially for the people that she's providing this education to. So that's 9 to 10. Can you imagine spending an hour of like, I need to make sure everyone is like clean in this room. We're going to dust the room that we're in today. Like that.
With 3-year-olds? Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Probably an hour might not be enough now that I say that out loud. But 10 to 11, intellectual exercises, objective lessons interrupted by short rest periods, nomenclature and sense exercises. 11 to 11:30, simple gymnastics, ordinary movements done gracefully, normal position of the body, walking, marching in line, salutations, movements for attention, placing of objects gracefully. 11:30 to 12 is lunch. 12 to 1 is free games. 1 to 2 is directed games, if possible in the open air. 2 to 3 manual work. 3 to 4 collective gymnastics and songs, if possible in the open air. And then she goes into more detail of what each of those things are, but that's your typical day.
It's good to me.
So
For 3 to 6-year-olds, yep, I'm on board.
So a lot of play, but there is this, things are directed. There is an adult in the room. Well, I should be careful with my terminology here. So the teacher I forget the term. I believe they call them administrators. Like there's a different term that Maria will use through the book. But the adult in the room is an observer to this classroom as opposed to a teacher or director, right? So they will observe and make comments when a mistake happens or something doesn't go right. But take the example, if someone spills something in the classroom, the response is to say, should we get a cloth and clean that up? Not, you made a mistake, you did this wrong, go clean this up right now. So it's more an observation that's offered to the child, and then they kind of take that and direct themselves toward.
One of the
doing
child
that action.
says, "That's an interesting observation. I'm gonna go play."
They might be. Let's go through these.
Is there a half hour for correction and discipline?
Discipline there's a chapter on discipline, but let me see if I can get the opening line of that section, because I imagine you all will hate all of this. Discipline through liberty, I believe, is the name of that chapter. Discipline must come through liberty. Here's a great principle which is difficult for the followers of common school methods to understand. How shall one obtain discipline in a class of free children? Certainly in our system, we have a concept of discipline very different from that commonly accepted. If discipline is founded upon liberty, the discipline itself must necessarily be active. We do not consider an individual disciplined only when he has been rendered as artificially silent as a mute and as immovable as a paralytic. He is an individual annihilated, not disciplined. So, you got a kid being really loud. You have not achieved discipline at the point where you've stopped them from talking.
Yeah.
Like the goal is not to stop them from speaking. The goal is for them to
Be self-controlled.
to want to make that choice for themselves and to be, like, again, a functioning human in this classroom. I'm not sure you all would disagree with that.
No.
Right? Like, even when you all are disciplining kids, it's not, you don't want them out of the room or like
Gone forever.
yeah, you want them to like become a functional member of your classroom. So maybe I'm over. Yeah.
But there is an element where, like, I do need you to hush up, though, because you're messing up everybody else's day.
Yeah.
So, like, those kids need to learn, and if you are causing them not to learn, then there is an element of you do need to be quiet.
There's a process.
Yeah.
But then
There's
the
like
end of that
immediate,
is,
medium, and long-term needs.
yes, yeah.
So I'll be jumping around some of these principles, and again, you'll get different lists depending on where you look or kind of who you ask. There is a Montessori certification body that will, like, there is a version of quote unquote official Montessori, but there are also many schools that call themselves that don't have the certification, and I believe there are multiple certifying groups. So there's not like So there's, as you might imagine with this method, there are kind of many implementations of it, but. Maybe in line with this, you'll often see an idea of that there is freedom in the classroom, but that freedom is within limits. So the children get to choose their activities. You kind of have a space. A second principle is a prepared environment, which I'll go through next. But you have a space where the child is getting to direct like what they're doing, like what they're spending their time working on. But there are guidelines and expectations within that room.
Presumably there was also like objects that were decided to be put in that room and things that were decided not to be put in that room.
So let me go to that one. So another common idea is a prepared environment.
Yeah.
So the learning environment, it's carefully designed. It encourages independence. It's to facilitate learning. The classrooms will have age-appropriate, hands-on toys and materials that will promote exploration and discovery. The Montessori will say somewhere the first aim of the prepared environment is to render the growing child independent of the adult. So you want the child to be able to explore in the space. The adult has thought through what's in that classroom, and then the kid can explore and like go after whatever they find interesting. So that kind of gets at you don't put Minecraft, like you don't put an Xbox in that room. It maybe is the answer to that earlier concern of you only put things that you want them to be working on, and I forget if it's one of the other. So something that Maria will talk about in the book, in the Montessori method, is that the toys you put there are meant to prepare these kids to do something. She talks a lot about kind of like this board with cloth on it with buttons and strings that kids will button together and unbutton, that they'll tie together in a knot and untie. And the skill that they're learning, again, this is age 3 to 6, they're learning to eventually be able to dress themselves, which like at 3, they're probably not able to do. But through this practice of this kind of activity, they're going to learn the practical skill of, I can change my clothes eventually. But they don't realize they're learning it. They're learning it because an adult ahead of time put that toy in the room, they played with it, absorbed something, and then learned a skill. So, on board so far? Is there anything here where you're like, this sounds?
I'm on board. I guess I'm super curious as to like how it sounds like if she's saying this is from 3 to 6, where we get from 6 to 16, and how why we think that or what changes, what doesn't change.
She expands it at the end of toward the end of her life. I believe she starts building out. I think it's 6 to 12 is what Maria actually works on, and then since then there are Montessori high schools, so it certainly expands beyond that. I'd say in general you would expect. So it's not. Many of these principles will still apply. I'm thinking through them just right now. Some of the tactile ones might get harder as you get older, just in terms of like, how do you teach calculus through, I don't know, you probably still could. And I'm sure we have people listening who teach math in a Montessori school. But let me keep running through this. Just a few other pieces of what you'll often see called being associated with Montessori. We've bounced around. This is probably the most important. This child-centered learning is a term that you'll hear. Montessori education focusing on the needs, the interests, the abilities of each child. There's not just this one standard curriculum that you need everyone to learn, absorb, have received. So the educator is they're observing, they're guiding, but the children are kind of choosing the thing that they are going to work on. I don't think this is one of the principles, but a thing you'll hear is that you never want to interrupt the child at play. And Maria has this whole thing about how the work of children is play. And so she'll draw comparisons. I remember she was in med school before she builds out this school, and she'll talk about like a scientist who's really engaged in their work. Flow is a more modern term for what we call this, but people who are like really engaged, they skip meals, right? Like they're so into what they're doing that they don't need to eat. They'll just be totally engaged with what they're doing. And you wouldn't want to interrupt that person, right? They are they're
locked in. They're it takes so much time to get into that state.
Yes.
That, like, it's almost like, that if you break it, it's like you need to do another 20 minutes
Yes.
of just focus just to get back there. Yeah.
And if the flow is like toward a product, so I think flow is often confused with like the like a Netflix coma or something. Like they kind of look similar in that you lose track of time and are very much focused on what you're doing. The difference with flow being that you're doing something productive, you're doing something beneficial, you're learning, and you're gaining something from that time that if you interrupt and take people out of it, they're going to miss out on something.
Yeah.
Right. And it, like you say, Graham, it will take time for them to get back into it. So child-directed learning, child-centered learning, they get to pick what they work on, what they learn. And if your environment is prepared well, the thing that they're spending their time on is something beneficial to the kid. Right. And so that's the adult has exerted their influence ahead of time instead of having to tell them, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
It always feels very sneaky, not manipulative, or maybe manipulative in the right way. There's always manipulation in teaching. But it's like, oh yeah, you're totally free, but all the objects in there are like,
Yeah.
haha,
Well, that's
you're learning.
Yeah. I wondered if you would think about that, because again, this comes at a time where there is a broad optimism of what science will bring to the world.
Yeah.
I figured you would make a comment, so I saved this for now. The subtitle of this book is Scientific Pedagogy as Applied to Child Education in the Children's Houses, which is the thing that she founded. Scientific pedagogy, like it's this belief that this is the right way because we can observe the right way to teach a kid, right? Which would then lead to there being one answer.
It does. Right? I mean, so the thing that I've always chafed a little bit with Montessori is that it does kind of feel like Jane Goodall and the Apes. Like it does sort of feel like you've got the teacher, you got the observer in the lab coat and the patients who are like in the asylum doing their thing.
Sure.
And so, and that sort of comes back to the meme joke, which is that the kids are kind of allowed to develop in their own way, and they can develop their own like weird social pathologies because they're just kind of left alone, and they're observed through this sort of like, overseer. Whereas in that classical approach, you are trying to have this imparting of a tradition from a generation to a generation. And I don't think that is in the Montessori at all. It really is this or the only way that comes across is in the objects and the things that are put into the classroom. And if those things are all just like, well, it's just like any curriculum or any sort of thing that's whatever is used to have to work the child. If it is just like Velcro straps and like Captain Underpants books, like you're not going to have that sort of depth of sophistication or culture, or the child's not going to be initiated into a grand world of conversation. But they are going to be very self-assured.
Right.
They are going to be very confident in their abilities, but they're not really like part of the conversation.
But don't you have students who they receive what you teach them in class and then go do their own self-directed?
For sure.
Like they read on their own. Like, and they are deepening their knowledge. They're more engaged in this great conversation of, great ideas. And they do that on their own, apart from a teacher telling them, go read this book, right? They kind of figure it out for themselves.
Yes.
So I don't like. I wonder if that's what this looks like at the middle school and high school level. If you're making available certain books, and then I don't know what it would look like to. It's probably getting over that first hump of like opening the book is probably the hardest part.
And again, this is why like from 3-year-olds to 6-year-olds, it makes a ton of sense. But like, if you have, let's say that you only fill the classroom with classical works, Iliad, Odyssey, you don't even give them the options for a bunch of other books. And they're like, all right, I'm going to try reading. And they flip open Paradise Lost. And they're like, oh, this is tough.
Right.
And they go and they flip out the Iliad. And they're like, oh, man, I just don't like reading. I'm just not a reader. And so at some point you need a guide that knows the books to take you through it, to show you how to do it, so that you can do it eventually. So it's like, AJ, you've done that Europe trip so many times, and now you can now you were the guide for your parents, right? When we first read a hard book, I don't know, we probably all have a teacher in our mind or somebody that we were at that right age where we sort of saw how they read, or we were sort of like, we tried to copy the way that they thought about literature or about history or about the discipline of learning, and have tried to incorporate that ourselves. And I'm not saying the Montessori method, neuters that ability. It's just, it's always given me the disassociated white lab coat and the little kids like playing with Play-Doh, and the observer's like, oh, very interesting, and writing on a pad of paper.
My beef is partially what you talked about, that say they open the Iliad, right? They're not going to understand it if they just start reading, so they have to have some sort of guide. Now, I can either build that into the book by giving them a Norton Anthology version, or give it to them myself. The thing is, aren't you just sort of doing the same thing? Like, okay, I give them a Norton Anthology version for them to sort of check it out. They read the guide. Why not just have me give it to them? Like, why? The only difference I can think is that the student has decided to read that rather than having to listen to me. And that variation of choice, while it is good to have a student who is actively engaged in these things, it reminds me of something C.S. Lewis talks about in The Weight of Glory, where there are some things that are a joy to learn right from the beginning, right? Learn how to play kickball, it's great. Right from swinging that first foot. Like, oh, you're like, oh, I'm bad at it, but this is still a game. I'm still having fun. That's awesome. Same with kind of like Minecraft. Learning Latin may be different. And especially going through the drudgery of memorizing verbs and the variations on verbs and all of those things. Like, yeah, you might have a blast for that for about 10 minutes. You're not going to spend 3 days doing that like you need to. And
Do you think that matches with the description from before about that grammar stage of them, like a child being a sponge, wanting to absorb ideas?
they do, but to an extent. Like, no kid is they don't have the attention span to keep on doing that and to discipline them to do, okay, I'm going to do 10 of these a day because I have a goal I want to get to. Yeah. C.S. Lewis says for some of those things, the joy comes much later, right? You're not going to have fun the first 2 years of Latin. You might have fun the 4th year and the 5th year. And then when you travel to Rome, knowing Latin, you're going to have a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of things like that, things that kind of suck at the beginning, but once you sort of get through the hard part, it becomes good. That is the sticking point for me, is there's a lot of things like that in education, and Montessori seems like a difficult way to tackle any of those.
So I think my Montessori, again, more principles to go through, we can talk more, but
Sure.
Montessori is like the thing I want to be true. Like, I want my children to be self-motivated, to want to read great books, to like come to me with like, Papa, I was reading in Paradise Lost this one chapter. Could you explain to me what is happening here? Like, that, it is everything I want for what education will look like. But I'm not convinced that that's what it will actually be, right? And that's where then I think you need more, some type of push. You need some kind of person to assist in that.
Yeah, even in your example, your kid came to you to ask because he needs a guide.
Well, that's where I would wonder if any listener, so again, I can only speak to what Maria wrote in this book, and she's only talking about early ages. I would be curious, like, if you had a class that was like motivated kids who are reading Homer on their own and then coming to you with their questions, doesn't that sound awesome?
Yes.
Like, wouldn't you love that?
So you are so the thing is, you are one of the objects in the room that the couch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at some point, a lot of the freedom of Montessori is the child can do what they want at a certain time, as opposed to like, oh, I got first period English. I don't really want to do English right now, but I got to go do it. Whereas at some point you say, it's reading time. This is the reading hour. And sometime during reading hour, the kid is going to want to come and talk to the teacher. And at some point, they're just going to want to come to read. The thing is, you need that person you need the adult, you need the teacher to be able to discern when is the kid avoiding the hard thing and going to the easy thing, and when are they actually going to a thing that is really beneficial for them. Yeah. So like if you had a reading hour and that was supposed to be a time when everyone is reading, and that child is always coming and talking to you about questions, they're avoiding, at some point, they're avoiding reading.
It's good.
And it's hard for you to know if the child is really like asking you questions so they can go back and really get more out of reading, or they're avoiding reading because it's hard and it's a lot more fun to talk to your teacher.
Yeah.
And that's just a thing that needs to come with the discernment of the teacher.
Yeah. So
Like you can feel that out in class. There are some times where a kid asks a question, you're like, you are asking this question because you want to stop what we're doing in this class right now and you want to derail this thing.
Yes.
And then there's a time where someone asks a question and it's like, that is awesome. That is a great question, and now we're going to stop what we're doing and talk about that.
Yeah.
And it just comes to like, I don't think AJ or I are perfect at knowing which is which, but you can probably
Tease it out. Yeah.
probably got like an 80% hit rate.
Right.
Where
Probably more than
you
that.
know when a student's trying to derail, you know when a student is actually like earnestly wanting to know.
Yeah.
It seems to me that Montessori is almost ideal for building a society, but not a person.
Okay.
So say I've got a Montessori school. Some of the things in my little class are metallurgy working objects, right? So I got a kid, learns to weld, learns to make metal sculptures. He's the best metal worker in 3 states, right? Because he has spent his entire formative years playing with metal, playing with the torch, playing with all of these things that do that. He is well formed of hand, but he is ill formed of soul, right? He's a great metal worker. He will be wildly successful. He'll make goblets. He'll make all kinds of things.
Goblets.
That's awesome.
But when he, say, carves a scene into the goblet, he's not going to know what that scene is. Someone will request it, they'll send him a picture, and he won't know the reference of where that's coming from. He might have a horrible relationship with his family. He might be the kind of man who steals from all his customers. Is he successful? Yeah, he's the best metal worker in 3 states. We have a great city because of partially him, because he can make great things for our cathedrals, whatever it is. But he has a different need, right? He's making lots of money, but as far as forming a soul, he is going to avoid those things that are difficult. And in education, there are many. You're going to have the kids that just read, but again, like he will maybe be great formed of soul, but he'll be ill formed of hand.
Yeah.
He won't know the good products. He maybe will be bad at physical labor. He won't. Maybe he won't dress himself. Maybe he falls into what are the stereotypical guy that sort of silos himself in a room with all his books and papers, and then becomes like a horrible crotchety old hermit that knows really esoteric things about the moon.
Yep.
Right. So
That's my fear for me.
Wasn't lumpy the term that you used before? Like
Yeah, the
that-
lumpy brain. I mean, so like,
yes,
I think we
yes.
can all look back on our childhoods and say, man, there are things that I wish I spent more time working on. I wish I didn't quit piano when I was 6 or whatever it is.
Yep, I got that.
And, you know,
I wish I spent more time woodworking with my dad.
I wish I had spent more time sort of like cultivating a love of more physical things. Like physical activity, running, baseball, soccer, sports,
Yep.
playing that kind of stuff, because I read. I've read a lot and I'm good at it, and I've made my professional career doing it. But, you know, there's part of me that like envies the jogger who just loves to run.
Yep.
Or, and I'm sure there's like the CrossFit bro that just loves the gym and has worked his whole life. And he's like, man, I wish I could read philosophy. You know, there's this like, I think just to AJ's point, we do want to have that full well-roundedness of human life.
Yeah.
And if we're sort of left to our own devices, we won't.
Yeah.
Because there's at some point, there's going to be the barrier that we don't want to cross.
Yeah, and I guess it's just the question of how do you get that? How do you, again, I just like the metaphor of the lumpiness. How do you even out that lumpiness? And is it you speak to that directly? You say, you child are very good at metallurgy, but you are a scumbag, so we're going to do moral education now. Or when they come to the classroom, is it set up in such a way where the metallurgy is taken out or the schedule is adjusted in some way? And so like the only thing to do is something else, right? You either handle it directly or indirectly.
But even indirectly, like take that metallurgy kid, take away his tools, and give him the Iliad. He's just going to
Be
sit
really
there.
happy, right? No.
Like
He's gonna be over the moon. No, he's gonna be really mad, right?
He'll be angry that those are gone, and he's not going to read.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think with certain things, those difficult things like memorizing Latin verbs, until the kid can see the enjoyment and understands that it's coming, like they have to be pushed. They have to be forced. You have to be forced with grades, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But for the hard things, like this is where one situation where students need to trust their teachers. And I try to communicate it to my students, like I'm doing this for your good. Yeah. I can see the good at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to describe it to you. This is what you are working for. You probably don't see it yet, but it will be good, I promise.
Sure.
And then have them.
Yeah, you do have to be pushed. You do have to be forced with you have to be cajoled with some kind of grade or punishment. But then there also is a point where you need to stop and like allow the child to make the mistake of not wanting to do it.
Yeah.
So you can't force them with a grade or with an assessment forever. And maybe it's just, it's just natural that by the time you're out of high school and college, like grades don't mean very much.
Right.
And I wonder if it's like, if 18 really is the right age or if it's a lot sooner. There's always been part of me that thinks 15, 16, that the last sort of 2 or 3 years of public education, and like basically like 11th to 12th grade is kind of like...
They're already kind of adults.
They're kind of, they're in terms of intellectual capacity, like how much more ground are you covering developmentally with another, maybe it's just even seniors, that last year of English, that last year of history, that last year of math. Is it a 2-year thing? Really, and this is something that the longer I teach, the more I'm convicted of. The battle really is from ages 7 to 14.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think those early years are very, very important, but like the battle is those 7 years. I think those are the critical years of education. Give me a kid that's had great teachers and people that have really opened their mind to the joy of learning from 7 to 14, and I have the easiest job as a 10th grade teacher. And it doesn't even matter what I do. I just sort of like continue I just sort of continue the momentum forward.
Yep.
Whereas I think the critical years are those 7 years of when they So
I think I've always like the grammar school teachers at Veritas. They just do an incredible job. Of like they set such a solid foundation for then what is built on in
sure.
logic and rhetoric. So, and that I just think it's important for this of the method we're talking about is oriented toward much younger children. And honestly, I hear your point about grades, especially for maybe a high schooler who needs to be goaded a little bit more. But like, you're gonna
You
grade
don't need to grade a
my
6-year-old.
3-year-old on like whether he can
Yeah.
like button a toy or not. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's where I see similarity between what we would call the grammar stage, if we think of it that way. Just moving toward wrapping up, there are a few ideas, concepts that come up. There's this term called the absorbent mind that Montessori will reference. She has a book also called The Absorbent Mind. And it's that same idea of like these children, when they're little, they're sponges. Anything you tell them, they are just holding on to that information, very easily able to memorize, learn things at that age. This goes with another idea of what she'll call sensitive periods. I'll just read her quote. A child's different periods of growth and development are referred to as sensitive periods. It's during these periods that a child's development occurs in the most natural and effective way. And so it's actually similar, Graham, to your point about 7 to 14 being kind of key. She'll say it's earlier, that the foundation actually is happening between 3 and 6. And like, I don't think anyone would say that you're like beyond hope if you're not
Sure.
like
No, of
well
course not, yeah.
disciplined at any age. But like, given the choice, like why not sooner? Like why not at 3 to 6 set up some self-discipline, some self-motivation, and then that would make 7 easier, which would then make high school eventually easier, right?
My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and but when my sister and I were young, she didn't teach. But what she did to make some extra money was that she ran a daycare out of our house after school, basically from like 3 to 5, when parents would pick them up.
Yeah.
And our basement was set up like this kind of school, where it was just bins of toys and everything was selected, and there was nothing. There was no TV. There was nothing. It was like there was books and blocks and Lego, and the whole room was set up with things that were beneficial in that way, and nothing was just time killing. And I realized my mom wasn't a Montessori teacher, but she was sort of in that sort of vein of, you know, that Sunday school vein of like the objects that you fill the space for the child to explore in. All of them need to be sort of beneficial objects in that way.
Yeah.
And that was my life from when I was a little kid. Every day you come home from school from 3 to 5, your house was filled with other kids, which sometimes I didn't like.
Okay, sure.
But everything in our basement was sort of geared towards that kind of like play. And I think that is a beneficial thing.
And I think especially kept to this age.
Yeah.
Like, so
Absolutely.
The things that are like I most appreciate out of this kind of Montessori world is this is maybe silly, but there's this chore list that I don't know if Maria Montessori herself put this together, but it's essentially by age chores that should be
that
done
children
by
can do.
children.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at this when my first was born and thinking like they must have been off by 2 years, right? Like they were 2 years too young to be able to be doing these things that are described. But I think it's this really good challenge of your kid can do more than you think they can. And they
Can you give me an example? Like
I think I pulled up one of these lists. So they 3 to 4 they can make their bed. Then maybe that's not as surprising. I'm just looking 12 to 18. They can start fetching if you ask them for a diaper or for
Months?
clothes. Yeah, months. Sorry, yes, years. Yeah, hopefully they can dress themselves at 12 to 18. But no, 12 to 18 months. They can take their dirty clothes to the laundry basket. They can open curtains. You can give them 2 options for clothes, and they can pick one. They can brush their hair. They can brush their teeth with some assistance. They can start washing their hands. Just things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that orientation toward I want this child to be independent, and my job is to teach them to be independent, is really healthy and good. And so this idea of that starting with these chores when they're little, I think is really helpful. And that's a thing I associate with Montessori.
And the child wants to do it too.
They want to.
Yeah.
Every
Yes.
second-born child wants to do what their older brother or older sister can do.
Yes.
They want to. So there's a way, or in some how can I phrase it? It seems like the second-born kid is wanting to play catch-up.
Yep.
Whereas the firstborn child doesn't really know any different because they've always are the first to do it. And so, it's that mimetic desire, right? Like that's the wanting to be able to do what other people can do.
Right.
And that's one thing I appreciate about living with Stevie and Troy. When they're parenting, they said, if it's something that the kid can do for themselves, we won't do it
Yeah,
for them.
exactly.
So like those kids did their own laundry, a lot of it. Those kids made their own food. Like they could see barely over the stove, but they were stirring the beans
Yeah,
and like
that's
making their own
awesome.
nachos.
Yeah.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
They were like these tiny little independent savages. It was
Yes.
wonderful.
So that's the kind of this orientation toward you want them independent, you want them doing their own thing. I think is really helpful. It's not AJ's point is a good, like, it's not unique to Montessori, but it's like that perspective. Make sure that you focus on that and see that. The other thing that's like super helpful, and I appreciate, maybe this is silly, coming out of Montessori is the toys that are Montessori are the best toys. That they are thoughtfully, I'm sure there are poorly made ones, but most of them are like beautifully made. They're crafted in such a way as to be training young kids toward a certain skill. Again, I gave the example of like buttoning one's clothes, being able to dress oneself, flipping switches, pressing buttons. Like it's teaching them to interact with the world around them. But the kid learns that through play. And so just that whole class of Montessori toys, like that, I think that's just a super helpful thing to, regardless of whether you send your kid to a school like this. So 2 things I super appreciate out of the Montessori method, but probably makes most sense at this young age, like we're talking about. I would have some questions about, maybe 6 to 9, but somewhere around this middle school, high school time frame, it'd be like, I would have questions about how that's implemented, but even that's beyond what Maria Montessori herself was working on. So that's everything I have. Anything else
Cool.
before we?
Great.
Okay. Well,
you introed this. So you
I
got
intro.
you
So
gotta do
let's go ahead and wrap up our game of life. Graham, can you go ahead and roll the die? Can you actually roll yours too, AJ? Who wins? I want to see who wins. What'd you get?
Got a 1.
A 1.
4, baby.
Okay, so
you got to roll 2.
Oh, so but I'm the game master, so don't I win no matter what?
No, I don't
okay.
think so.
A 3.
Let's
so
go.
AJ, you retire to your own private island with
Perfect.
millions of dollars, and
I did a 1 hour of work at
did
$1 trillion.
and you got $1 trillion. Graham, you are fired. Didn't you get fired from your job earlier, AJ?
He did.
Yeah. So
I did, but I turned it around.
I was highly sought after.
you were highly sought after, but it
Didn't
wasn't.
work out.
It wasn't.
Consistent failure marked you as.
Jeez
But you know what? Even in spite of
Undesirable.
all that, you retire to your own plot of land outside of Austin, Texas,
There
and
you go.
life is okay.
Scratch out an existence with the
No,
The
since this
hard
is
scrabbled dirt of Texas.
with the
since this is the
thorns
wrap-
and thistles by the sweat of my brow.
which is what you do now. Since this is the wrap up, actually, since you're a 1, Graham will be responsible for our Twitter, maintaining our Twitter account.
First shall be last.
Yeah, so you will suffer by dealing with Twitter, or x.com/CliscalStuff, CLSSCAL stuff. Since I'm in the middle, I'll take email. So the guys at classicalstuff.net and Patreon. I mean, that's got to be for the winner, right?
Patreon.com/classical stuff.
There it is. This
Is
guy.
that it? Or is that classical stuff you should know?
No, just classical stuff.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
easy.
Yeah. Check it out for in-between episodes and monthly AMAs. And this, like, you can like chat with, there's like this chat feature where like all the
Yeah,
patrons.
that's new. The
It is
chat
fun.
feature.
Yeah.
Chat
It's
feature's
so
fun.
fun.
So it's like
I've
all
been enjoying
patrons
it.
plus us. It's like really fun. So
We all send pictures of our pets.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's great.
AJ was sending up pictures from his Europe trip recently, which
Yeah.
was the actual reason we were off for a couple weeks. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk with you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.